Hey, welcome to Prairie Lakes Church. We're really glad that you're here. It's a week where we saw 93 degrees outside, at least in my part of the state. And so no spring for you, right? But it's May. The seasons obviously are changing. And around here we've been in a series for the last several weeks called How Do I Help My Kids? And it's just a series, especially for those of us who are kind of getting back into the rhythm of church or getting into the church for the very first time. Just super practical, okay? Because parenting isn't easy. And so I want to make sure you know, even for the top of the service, on our website, prairielakechurch.org, there is a resource page where every single weekend, given what we're talking about, we want to steer you as parents back to that spot. All right, so here's where we've been, okay? Here's where we've been. Several weeks ago, Pastor John kicked us off talking about how to help kids be successful. How do I help them navigate gender? Last week, we were talking, I spoke on how do we help our kids make friends. This week is this question, right? And this is a good one. How do we help our kids behave, right? Like, how do we help those little jerks, loved ones of ours, behave? How do we do that? And so last week when we were talking about helping our kids make friends, I made this invitation, and it was, hey, I just invite anybody, would you text us? When it comes to helping our kids make friends, we may not cover what you want to cover, and you have specific, text us. And several of you last week, you took advantage of that. And so I want to make the same invitation again this week. But as I do, I want to share with you some of the questions we got because they're relevant for this week as we talk about how do we help our kids make friends. Here's what they sounded like, okay? My 5-year-old doesn't understand that he can't hurt people. A lot of us have, like when our kid starts hitting school and they do that and like, ooh, and how do you get that through to them? How do you help your child with anxiety and depression when they don't want to talk about it? That's one. And this one, how do you help your child navigate the drama because, and I know this is not unique to this parent, they don't seem to take my suggestions, right? So we're wrestling with things like that. We've just got a lot of questions as parents. We just do. And the reality is parenting can be it can feel like it's a really high pressure and difficult job at times. And there can be more than a few times as a parent, more than a few, where you feel like you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. When you're trying to help your kids, especially when you're trying to help them with behavior problems, there's this feeling or this statement, and I even heard it last weekend, it's, I've tried everything and nothing seems to be working. And it's not like parenting is always that way, right? Or I'm not even trying to say it's mostly that way. But there are times when it certainly does feel exactly like that. You know, where you just tried everything and nothing's working. And when we talk about helping our kids behave, that's an area of parenting, I think anyways, where we're most likely to feel that most often. Helping our kids behave, help them do the right thing, not do the wrong thing. So if that's you, okay, if you're in this spot and you're caught between this rock and the hard place and you're stuck and you don't really know how to help your kids just behave better, I've got great news. Great news for you this weekend. I have the parenting silver bullet. I've discovered it. That will solve literally every behavior problem any parent has ever or will ever face, no matter who you are, what type of kid you got, okay? That's the great news. And it can be yours for only 4 easy payments of, 4 easy payments, $19.95, right? And by the way, as I make that joke, I started thinking about, like, is that even relevant anymore? Do people even know what that is? It probably needs to be updated to, like, and you can, join my monthly subscription box of parenting crap that I will deliver to you right? But wouldn't it be great, right? Wouldn't it be great to have a silver bullet when it came to this area of our parenting that solved all of our kids' behavior issues? Like when you've tried everything and nothing else is working, wouldn't that really be so great? Well, In case you have not picked up on the now way too long of a joke, let me just say the thing that all of us as parents, past and present, already knew to be true, and that is this: there isn't a silver bullet, okay? And it's a very depressing and discouraging, familiar thing, but that's the case. And not only that, okay, there's a few other things I want to get on the table right at the top here before we dive in, because just maybe a few reality checks, things that are just true, but the reality of all of our situations when it comes to this area of our parenting. Number one is this: we all, every single parent, starts from a different place. We all start from different places with very different convictions, okay? When it comes to helping or interacting with our kids' behavior, it's all very different. Some of us have pretty strong convictions that, hey, under no circumstances would you want to punish and make punishment a part of how you help your kids behave, right? So things like spanking or any other type of negative consequence that's going to be painful or discomfort or anything like that, right? And some of us are on the opposite end of that. Like, hey, if you ain't spanking your child, you're not parenting them, you know? Some of us are on that side. Some of us remember what our parents did with us when we were kids, and we use that as a model. It's been really helpful, right? Others of us remember how we grew up and how our parents did that, and we're trying to push as far away from that as possible. We all start from just very different places when it comes to this area of our parenting, and we start with very different convictions. Let's just get that on the table, right? Number one. Number two, hey, not all kids are the same. Not all kids are the same. What works with my kids might not work with yours, or vice versa. We've got the quiet readers, we've got the bouncing off the wall kids, we've got the, if you look at disappointment with me, at me, I'm gonna crumble right in front of you kind of kids. And we have the, you can ground me for eternity and it is not gonna make a stinking difference because I'm gonna do what I wanna do kind of kids, right? Like, every child is different, and sometimes dramatically so. There's just not a one-size-fits-all deal when it comes to helping our kids with their behavior. There's just not. Reality check, right? And the number three of three, in this area of our parenting, and this is really where we're going to go this weekend, principles are universal. In other words, there are some things that are true for every kid everywhere, regardless of who they are and who you are as a parent. There really are some underlying principles that we can dial into, but the application of those principles is where it gets really specific, okay? And so because of just how many of us are part of Prairie Lakes Church and wherever, like, we're gonna stick more on the principle side, and we're gonna get a little bit of the application side, okay? Because I don't wanna be so generic that we're not helpful, but let's just kind of get that on the table as well. How you apply these principles to your specific child, it's just pretty specific. It may not look the same way. In fact, we're gonna say it probably shouldn't look the same way, okay? All right, so let's get to it. This weekend, I want to just share with you 5 principles that I've found pretty helpful for helping my kids generally speaking, just helping them with their behavior, helping them behave. And they're universally true, right? Like, they have to be applied differently depending on who you are and how your child's wired, but they're very relevant, I think, for everyone, everywhere. 5 principles. Let's get to number 1, okay? When it comes to helping your kids behave, number 1, discipline is a 4-letter word, but not a bad one. Really, it's L-O-V-E. Discipline is love. It is. And so I know I'm challenging kind of right out of the gate here, which is a shocker if you know me, but I think a lot of us approach this area of helping our kids with their behavior, this area of discipline, we approach it like it's a different kind of 4-letter word. Like, discipline, it's a word that should never be uttered. It should be avoided at all costs. It's not really good. It's a last resort, those kinds of things, right? It's kind of, a lot of us approach it that way. I want to challenge you, okay? It's exactly the opposite. To discipline your child in this area of their life, in this area of your parent, discipline is to love them. It really is. Take a look at what Proverbs 13:24 says. It's going to say, whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. So there's the Bible, right? You know, there it is, that backwards book telling parents to beat their kids, right? There it is. A couple of things here, okay? First, it's a proverb, and which by definition is a principle or a saying, okay? Meaning, if you're going to interpret verses like this in Proverbs correctly, if you're going to get down to what the author is actually saying, you've got to extract the principle from the proverb. So what's it saying? Is it trying to say that hey, go find a literal rod? You know, is wood okay? Is it steel? Is that too much, right? Like, is that, like, it's ridiculous, right? If you approach it that way, that'd be ridiculous. Well, what is it saying instead? Well, it's saying that if you don't discipline your kids, if you feel like the most loving thing is to not, this proverb is saying is, nope, actually that is unloving. It gets clearer, I think, in how the Message translation of the Bible captures it. Same verse, but here's how it captures it. It says, if a refusal to correct is a refusal to love. A refusal to correct is a refusal. Love your children by disciplining them. Love them by disciplining them. This is going to be a shock to you, and I know, but I am far from a perfect parent. And I know that's very disappointing and just, what a shock, right? I am, but as an imperfect parent, just give me the grace to say something to you as parents. This, by far, this is the most common mistake that I witness other parents making with their kids. And we make a lot of mistakes as parents, right? This one, from my seat, is probably by far the most common. It's a refusal to correct. It's a big mistake. Now, I'm not trying to tell you how to do it. I'm not trying to say that you're doing it wrong. I'm not suggesting that you do it how I do it and not how you do it. I'm not going to make you make suggestions for what works for my kids, and so it might work for yours. I'm not going to do any of that, but what I am saying is this. I watch a lot of bad behavior get tolerated or excused or negotiated or laughed off or just plain ignored. And all of those more, for me, are under the heading of like just a refusal. Proverbs is telling us this. Hey, if you really love your kid, you'll discipline them. Okay? So let me go be a little bit of a level down, be a little bit more practical. Just a few things that have been helpful for me. And again, these have to be applied maybe very differently or not at all, depending on your situation. But here's a level down, okay? And I think still in the principal area, but number one, under this heading of discipline, be consistent. Consistency is really important. Consistency are guardrails. If it's okay sometimes and not okay other times, if you're really on it sometimes and then you completely ignore the other times, there's no guardrails to this. And that's going to feel for your kid like, whoa, what's happening here? When they're older, they're going to start like pointing at you about how much of a hypocrite you are, how inconsistent. Consistency is key here. Those are the guardrails that keeps your kid on track. They know what to expect. Stay proportional. Stay proportional. The quote-unquote punishment has to fit the quote-unquote crime, right? If you way overreact to something that's just not a big deal, or you way underreact to something that is a huge deal, that's where it's going to get confusing for your kids. Stay proportional. And the third one is, and this is maybe the most important, part of the reason I think why we refuse to correct when we do is a lot of us had an experience of that where our parents did it, or our caregiver did it out of anger. And let's be really clear on this, okay? Disciplining out of anger when you're physically bigger and stronger and louder, even if it's not a violent physical reaction, that's where we get into the abuse category. And at no time, Is anything like that appropriate? Right? So discipline is not the same as abuse. Disciplining out of anger certainly can be. We can't do that as parents. We got to check that at the door. Okay? Okay, there's the first principle, right? Number one, hey, discipline is a 4-letter word. It's loving. Number two, remember, you're raising adults. Remember, you're not raising kids, you're raising adults. That's the goal, right? We want those little jerks to be really cool, really good, really godly, really generous men and women. So let's just admit some things. It's easy, again, this is for me, probably for you too. It's easy as a parent to bow to the tyranny of the urgent, to just see like what is right in front of you. And there's not much of a better month than the month of May, which we're in, to illustrate this. We're getting reminders of that every single day. We're going just all over. I was talking to Pastor Corey this week. Pastor Corey, he pastors our New Hampton campus. And I was just kind of asking him how things are with the family and where they're at. He was saying they were out one night in New Hampton for a band concert, then up to Decorah for its kids game, and I think maybe down to Waverly for something else, and then back in New Hampton for something else, and we're going to go back to Decorah, right? Like we're all over the map, right, in the month of May. One sport ends, another one begins. It's about all we can do right now as parents, as kids, to show up at the right place at the right time. And some of us are trying to go like, I could stay till here until, but then I have to go there, right? Okay. When we let the tyranny of the urgent or whatever's right in front of us define our vision for our kids, when our vision is what's happening tonight, and that's as far as we kind of go out, that's where we kind of get in trouble. That's why Proverbs says this. This is Proverbs 22:6. Start children off in the way they should go, or you can even say the way they're going to end up. Start them off there, and then when they're old, when they're men and women, they won't turn from it, likely. That's kind of who they are. Now, it's a proverb, so it's not a prescription, it's not a promise, it's a principle, it's not a guarantee, but it's a good principle, I think. And the pretty key phrase there is the way they should go. I want to have, as a parent, in my mind, right now, the way I want them to eventually be. How I eventually want them to live independent of me, right? So that when they get there, there's a good chance that they're going to be who they need to be. Two quick stories here, okay? This is just from our family's life. I'll take my son along with me to do some things that aren't easy and sometimes aren't comfortable, right? I'll get him out into the woods and it's going to be cold. We'll be working around the house in the yard, stuff like that. And some of us love stuff like that, but there's always an element of that it's hard. And I'll watch him kind of get into it and just struggle with it, just like all of us did as young men or young women. And I'll just say to him, hey man, guys have to do hard things. And I'm not saying that just guys have to do hard things. That's not a gender comment there, but like we're usually like the physically, like we just, we shovel the drive, we carry the stuff, we tear down. I mean, like just that's, guys do hard things. And I want him to know that now so that he becomes someone who embraces that when he's older. With my daughter, Ellie, okay? My daughter, Ellie, is in her class, she's kind of the smartest, or she's the prettiest, or she's the most popular, she has the most friends, or she's the most gregarious, or she's also the leader, right? That's just kind of who she is. And I'll watch her and I'll say, hey, when you have the most power or the most influence, who do you want to be? How do you want to use it? And we'll talk about it, right? Because if she's that way, and she's going to be that way as she grows, as she gets older, she's going to have the same power even more, same influence even more. When you're that person in the room, how do you want to use it? I want them thinking about that right now. So as they are young men, young women, older women, that they are who they need to be, right? Okay, so again, similar, just some quick principles here for helping our kids behave in this area of, hey, remember you're raising adults. Imagine the end. We talk about that in our children's ministry right here. When we have parents do child dedication with this little person in their arm, imagine who you want them to be at the end. Number two, talk to your kids now and often about their adult themselves. Don't just talk to them about how the game went. Talk to them about how they're interacting with that. What's their relationship like with that? When they're struggling with school, don't just talk about the solution at this time and this point in their lives. Talk to them a little bit about what it's like when you're an adult. Connect the dots for them. And then number 3, play the long game. Play the long game. We're going to navigate some crises as parents. Sometimes they're really, really big. But you have to know this, okay? Even some of the bigger crises, for the most part, they're temporary, okay? They are. And so don't overreact in this area, right? Because they're gonna face the same kind of crises even more significantly as adults, aren't they? Yeah, play the long game, play the long game. All right, number 2. Number 3, we're gonna keep on moving here. How do we help our kids behave? Number 3, get some help. Get some help. Full transparency, okay? This area, whether it's me as a parent or just me as a person, this is not a strength of mine. Generally speaking, it's quite the opposite. I don't like doing it. I don't like asking for help in most things. And I want you to hear me. I'm not wearing that like a badge, honestly. It's not something that I'm like actually proud of. You know, like in a job interview, what are your weaknesses? Well, I work too hard and I care too much. You know, those are my weaknesses. Right? Like it's not something like that. It's not like that. I'm not good at asking for help, and it's not a good thing. Quick story: one of the hardest things I've done in my ministry career was about 6 or 7 years ago now. I was for 6 years I was our Waterloo campus pastor. We had a church in the city that I grew up in, and it was good. But it came down to a spot where there was another church in Waterloo, a church plant that was kind of growing, and it was probably just way better positioned to do what we were trying to do and what we really weren't able to do for a long time. And so we made the tough decision to merge. We kind of came under them, and we actually gifted them some gear and some cash, and even like cast vision for our people to join if they wanted. It was really hard, right? Because you can imagine not everybody wants to do that. They don't feel like it was a decision they got to make. And anyways, I got to a spot, and because I'm not good at this, I got to a spot where I was just like holing up, and I was just trying to like make decisions and just get through it and make sure this thing happened. Well, it gets worse. On the last Sunday, okay, we made the announcement, had another weekend service after that, and then that was going to be the end, right? And so I would go to this barbecue that people are just kind of putting together, and they kind of want me there, and they kind of don't want me there. It's one of those deals. And I had decided, I don't remember why, I had decided that I needed to re-roof my detached garage, and it was a big one. Like, it was like 2 stalls, and then plus, like a little shop area in it. I was doing it by myself. And I had ripped all the shingles off, and that took me way long, right? Because it was a lot of work. And after this barbecue, like I leave early because I got to go try to, I'm like, it's going to rain tomorrow, so I have to like get it done. And I'm like up there. And there's no way I'm going to I'm not even going to be close. And I'm like, why am I this way? And thankfully, I had a couple of buddies who kind of caught wind of what I was doing, and they came over and they saved me, right? I don't like asking for help. And a lot of us in this area of our parenting, we don't like asking for help. I think there's more than a few of us as parents who have worked ourselves into that spot. We've got some things going on with our kids that we feel like other people wouldn't understand, or it's going to burden them, or maybe if we pull back the curtain, they wouldn't want to face those things, right? Maybe you've done something that you feel like it's your fault, and you don't want to face that, and so you can't tell anybody about it. Maybe you're wondering if your child might need some help that goes way beyond you and your expertise. Maybe you're sensing they need something emotionally or socially or developmentally. But you're worried about them. You're worried about them being labeled. You're worried about the medication thing. You're worried about not understanding and it just kind of going way beyond you and screwing them up for eternity, right? I mean, like, these are real thoughts and fears we have as a parent, which a lot of times drive us into the spot where we're not going to ask for help. Host of reasons. Here's where I want to encourage you, okay? If you find yourself in that spot, Proverbs 15:22 says this: plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. Now, the context of this one probably is like a king going to war. And he's in the war room, either before the battle or maybe even during it. The enemy's at the door, perhaps. There's a lot on the line. And what the author is saying here is this: the worst thing you can do is to hole up. The best thing you can do is to get a few more trusted voices around the table and start to attack it together. So practically, here's what this could look like in this area. Start with a trusted friend. Just start the discipline of not holding up and make it as low risk as you possibly can. Doesn't have to be the expert, doesn't have to solve all the problems, but it's just someone that can kind of go like, hey, yeah, talk to me about, and they're a safe and confidential person. Start with a trusted friend. Lean into your church. Part of the reason why we exist as staffers, family ministry staffers, campus pastors, key volunteers even, right? Your church community. We exist, and you would be shocked sometimes at what God can do as you just take a step of obedience and reveal, because a lot of times what you think is so unique to you isn't. And other people are not only dealing with it, but maybe they've got some helpful things to say around the church game. And the final one is this: let's be people who stay open to professional help. Let's be people who there's no stigma to that. You know, we're getting better and better at understanding human behavior, human psychology, developmental stuff. Like, there's just more and more out there, and that can be super scary and super intimidating. And you can readily find stories in which someone walked down that and it wasn't good. Okay. Still, let's be open to that, okay? Because our kids may need that. All right. Number 3. Number 4, don't give up. Don't give up. I have never run a marathon. I know it's a shocker, again, right? But I don't have any desire to. I never have, and I never will. And I feel fine about that. I feel fine about me as a human being, right? But there's probably at least 1 or 2 people in whatever room you're in who have. And if you ever hear the story that they tell, they'll tell you the story, as marathon runners will, about the wall. The wall. What's the wall? Well, they say around mile 20, biologically, your body kind of runs out of the kind of energy that it needs. And it starts telling the rest of the body, shut her down, right? There is no more energy to do it. And so sometimes it forces runners who've been running for 20 miles and years even to like walk or crawl or stop completely. And it's a really emotional and discouraging place to be because of all the sacrifice and all the training to be so close to the end, right? And not to extend this metaphor too far, but I think it's fair to say this: parenting is a marathon. It really is. And some of us are at the spot in our parenting where we have hit that wall. And it could look a lot differently, but I mean, maybe you got news from something your kid did that's just unthinkable. You got a phone call or an email or a whisper. One bad decision maybe led to a series of bad decisions. Or maybe it's not something that they did. Maybe it's something you did. Maybe you screwed up and you did something that inflicted a lot of damage. It's the wall, and it's called the wall because it feels like you're never going to be able to push through it. But I want you to listen, okay? Don't give up. Don't do it. This is from James. James 1 says this: consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. What James is talking about is he's talking to a group of people who have hit the wall. And for them, the wall looked like persecution. I mean, they're being drugged out of their homes for their faith. And what James is saying to those people is this: the wall is real, but it doesn't have to force you to quit. In fact, the wall can actually be a gift. A gift that teaches you a really valuable skill, which is perseverance. That's a gift to you as a parent. It's a gift to your kid. They're going to need to know that. It's an opportunity for you to kind of coach into that. I'm reading a biography of George Washington, and it's fascinating because, you know, I mean, he's obviously, there's a myth around him now of this just incredible founding father of our country, and there's some of that is absolutely true, right? Some things in his character and how he established, I mean, it's really just a figure I respect. But history says There was also some blemishes on that record because he's a human being like anybody else. And this biographer says, hey, he got to the spot that he got to and the moment that he got to in our country because he survived. He made a bunch of mistakes, but he persevered through them. It wasn't the expertise in a spotless record, it was that. Really encouraging for me as a leader who has made some pretty critical mistakes as well, okay? Last one, number 5, okay? How to help our kids behave. Let's make sure we remember that we can treat misbehavior as an opportunity. We can treat misbehavior as an opportunity to point our children to the need for grace. One of the best books I've written, one of the best books I've read on parenting is a book called Give Them Grace. Give Them Grace. And it captures this biblical truth from Galatians, where he says, why then was the law given at all? It was added because of transgressions, which are willful sins, until the seed to whom the promise referred to, Jesus, has come. So just unpacking that quickly. For us as parents, we're kind of the law, right? We're kind of the law. That's one of the roles we play as parents. So our job is to teach our kids right from wrong and help them to do right and keep them from doing wrong and correct them when they do and all those things. And that's what the law does here in Galatians. It's a guardrail. It keeps us from going off track, right? But the question that Galatians is asking here is this. Hey, because we all fall short, because we know what God says, and we know what's right, and so often and very predictably we don't do that. We're in this constant cycle of knowing what's right and not doing it, and knowing what's right and sometimes doing it for a time, but then screwing it all up. Galatians is going to ask, what was the point of that, God? Like, if you knew that we as your children were going to do this, why do it at all? And the answer that Galatians gives us is this: because it'll point you to your need for something beyond the right and wrong. It'll point you to your need for grace, and it'll point you to Jesus. And so here's what we're going to do, okay? We're going to go into a time of communion together, and we're going to take this last principle. We're going to get a chance to reflect on it for what it means for us, for what it means for us as parents, and for what it means maybe perhaps for our kids as well. So let me pray us into that moment together. Father in heaven, thank you for this time that we get a chance to just start thinking a little bit about how to help our kids behave. God, would you remind us as we kind of move into this moment that you've sent your son, Jesus, because we really, ultimately, we just couldn't do this on our own. Help us to be the kind of parents, God, that help our kids in this area, but God, point them ultimately to you. Jesus, we pray this in your name. Amen.